Hello, everybody. We are here for Tuesday Talks. Tuesday Talks is all about getting to know an individual from an industry and finding out what makes them tick. What do they care about? How their career reflects that, and what motivates them to keep going. Now, today's guest is Neeta Bhushan. Neeta is an international educator, best-selling author of three books. Emotional Grit is one of them, and her newest release, That Suck, Now What? Let's get Neeta on here and get to hear all her stories. Okay.
Hey,
Hi, Neeta. How are you doing?
I'm good. Zishan, how's it going, love?
I am doing great. Thank you very much for taking the time out and hopping on to Tuesday Talks to share your journey. I've done a short
We are
introduction for you
here.
already, but you're the best person to expound on that. So let the audience know who you
Yes.
are and what you do.
Ooh, I love that question. Who am I? Well, I'm a lover of life. I am a serial entrepreneur, and I would say that I'm an advocate of emotional health. I'm a queen of resilience and grit, and have really had a wild journey in life. So, former cosmetic dentist, sold my practice, and have now built a life doing what I really love, and that is helping others live their best life. So here we are.
I
Yes,
love
Mistress
that.
Matilda. Yes.
So the biggest question that everybody would have on their mind is, Nita, why do you do this?
Mm. Well, I feel like for those who have been around for a while, my love with Dharma, and really just when you've found your purpose, or when you've found what your calling is, when you're leaning into your Dharma, which is your soul's purpose, which is the thing that you are so passionate about, and the thing that you love, basically your gifts, it then becomes your life. And so I think for me, I've always been a community gatherer. I've been a lover of humans, and that's because I've seen a lot of humans that I've loved, died and transition early, and being the closest people to my life. My parents, my brother, and I've seen a lot of loss at an early age, where I think that a lot of the mental health, a lot of the bullying that we see online, a lot of the folks who are perhaps maybe unhappy or unstuck or stuck, I like to say that I can help them get unstuck, because I've totally been there. I've totally had to, be in survival mode so much in my life, where I've seen a lot of those dark days. I've seen a lot of that the hopelessness, the anxiety, the oh my gosh, is this going to get better? That was a big, huge part of the early stage of my life. I've seen divorce. I've been married before, and so I think that really culminating and connecting the dots in my life in all of these beautiful ways have really arrived me at a crossroads, and this new phase of life, where now I can, instead of being ashamed of my story, ashamed because I wanted to fit in, because I didn't want to be the outcast who felt broken many times, who felt like uh, there was no hope, that this dark cloud was never going to go away, because of just like the intensity of those losses. Um, and now arriving at a point where, because I've seen the dark, you can be that light as well. And now I get to have those conversations every day, whether it's in the form of Emotional Grit, which is my first book, whether it's in the form of building resiliency, or what I call, the audacity of resiliency, or audacious resiliency, in adults, in children, with friendships, in friends, uh, with how you want to share your voice in the world. Um, I'm just totally here for all of it. And and this is the path that we're on right now. So it's a super exciting time, I think.
I love this actually, and you shared about something about purpose there, right? So people trying to find their dharma, their purpose, and there are people that question that as well in terms of finding that purpose. I'm a firm believer of that you are we are all born with a compass that leads us to our true north. Hence, that
Hmm.
becomes the purpose, which and that is what you are feeling that you should be doing, not what everybody else is telling you to be doing. You should be doing, and that becomes your true north, and that is your compass, which is telling you to head that way every time, which is that feeling you
Hmm.
have. Um, in that process as well, I also firmly believe that you also create your purpose yourself. If you're, if you are looking for it and you're like, I don't know what that purpose is. What are your opinions on that, or what's your views on that? You are able to create your purpose as well.
Oh, absolutely. I think that, I just had a conversation with a girlfriend I hadn't seen. I'm here in Chicago, and it's my hometown, and you could probably see the river, somewhat maybe behind me. I think we did a test run earlier today, and it
Yeah,
feels
we
so
saw
good
that.
to be back home. It feels so good to be like where you grew up, because it kind of gives perspective. And in my conversation with my girlfriend, who I hadn't really seen in 15 years, and this is truth, and she was just asking, like, how do you know when you are meant for more, especially if you've been doing something for so long? She's like, how do you know that maybe you have something else in you? There's something else that you want to explore, but you know that what you're doing right now is maybe not that thing. But how can you know there's something else out there? And is basically what I shared with her, where I said, well, a lot of times we don't know what we don't know, right? If you've been doing, like I was doing, dentistry for 7 years, I didn't know what I didn't know outside of that bubble of dentistry or medicine. What I did know was, all right, I know that there's definitely something out of this bubble of medicine, outside of checking people's mouth, making them silent. Those things are all incredible, but I didn't know what was outside of that, just container. And so it's kind of like, if you're inside of your glass container, if you're inside, you cannot see what's on the outside, right? You can't see that this is
Hmm.
blue or teal blue or green, or, some of us will have different perspectives, because it is a very interesting shade of this teal green blue. But the idea is until you start saying yes to other opportunities, until you start saying yes to that new painting class, until you start saying yes to maybe a spoken word class, until you start saying yes to that, that improv class that you've always wanted to take but were so shy around, right? But yet you then say yes, and then you're kind of like, oh, hey, I kind of like this. Is actually this is in my wheel, if this is in my wheelhouse, how come I've never done that before? And so for me, in my journey, when I started saying yes to the things that scared me, and this was after, I had a very tumultuous first marriage, and I tried to keep it a secret, and I tried to keep it, oh gosh, coming from a, like Desi diaspora. My father was Indian. There's so much taboo. My mom was Filipino. There's so much taboo around divorce, and like, oh my God, you had a failed marriage, and God forbid you ever would get divorced. And you're, just like, you're broken, and what will people think, right? All of these things. And so for me, I had to, when I was rebuilding my identity, rebuilding myself, reinventing myself, having to uh, shy away from kind of that old world of mine to say yes to something new. I didn't know what else was out there. until I started saying yes. So I started saying yes to all of these things, to then get invited to a pitch competition, then get invited to women, sharing their ideas about their startups. Like, I had no idea what startup world culture meant. And then you start going to these pitch fests where then you start getting introduced to these investors and VCs. And I'm like, what is this world? Because I'm this cosmetic dentist who has this thriving practice. Yet I'm like, oh, this is curious. This is interesting. I'm going to go there more, because the people were really interesting and it was so different from what I was used to. So if you are, and this is what I told my girlfriend, if you're curious, but you're like, I've never really put myself out there, or I don't even know where to go, or the friends around me are not really lifting me up, go on meetup.com, go on, there's so many different Facebook groups. There's so many, see who the 2 or 3 people that, that really light you up or you get inspired by, because you see their posts or the way they have conversation, the way they're leading their podcasts. Maybe you want more of that, and see, well, what groups did they join? And I saw, for me, because I was such a dark time in my life, I had just, it was literally like a whole decade of grief that just kind of washed over me, of not really going through the depths of losing my mom, my dad, and my brother. And then a decade later, rebuilding myself with this divorce. I had to say yes to the things that scared me. And one of those things was like, oh, I'm going to see what funny people do, because I want more of that in my life, because things are just so dark in my life right now. I need to be around folks who are a little bit lighter. And that's where improv came into play. And I loved it so much. I didn't think I was going to be on Saturday Night Live ever, right? That wasn't my goal.
Yeah.
And for those in other places in the world, Saturday Night Live is like it's kind of like your ticket to, I don't know,
it's a prime
stand-up
slot,
comedy,
right?
and all of these things. Right. It's a huge place to be. And if you want to go that route, for me, it was just getting me out of my shell. And I think also, not only that, it's giving you an outlet in so many ways of how to better understand parts of yourself that maybe you've never known before. So this was a part of myself that I was like, oh, hi, who's this woman? Who's this? Who's this girl? And for me, it was huge, because I could tap into that. I could tap into this like playful, super fun side of me, even though I was going through, the other side of grief, the heaviness, the darkness, the sadness, the despair, the, oh shit, am I ever going to find love again? Am I ever going to get over this time in my life? Yet every time I would go to an improv class, I even took stand-up comedy, in that same light. It had me become better as a speaker. It had me become better at taking more risks, because then I was starting to invest in these women pitching their ideas. I was still a cosmetic dentist, but I was starting to go to these things to learn more, because I was fascinated. And then that getting to say, hey, how about maybe we can start a nonprofit? I started a nonprofit. I just said, F yes to everything. And I was like, all right, we're going to do it. Because in my mind, I was like, I want to find people who have this kind of energy for life. I want to be around them all the time, and what are they doing? And so then it got me to go to all the way from Chicago, my hometown where I was, all the way to Stanford to learn about how nonprofits actually work, how they, structure themselves. And then I learned from people at, the Stanford Business School, because they were teaching this course. And then I'm like, oh, wait, Stanford startups, wait, this is like where everyone gets their funding from. And it was just like saying yes to those breadcrumbs and nuggets along the way, because then your exposure to the things that you may have either doubted yourself, or you may thought, oh, that's not ever for me, I could never do something like that. It becomes more of a reality, because you're saying yes to this new version of yourself, and you're also saying yes to what's possible, because you're tapping into that side of you that you've never even seen. So the improv Neeta gave birth to the the stand-up comedy Neeta that gave birth to taking risks and starting this nonprofit Neeta that gave birth to moving from Chicago all the way to, Silicon Valley, which is exactly what I did. I sold my practice 2 years from that time. And I mean, there was a lot of other, factors in that, but that was really the birthing of this next new chapter. It was my dream always to write a book. I just didn't know how I was going to do it again as a dentist. I felt like I was so limited in this box of thinking. And, I love and respect my colleagues who have gone into, medicine, and they really love the profession. But I feel like many times when you're in the box, you're in the box. It's like you're only in that box.
You're not seeing anything else. Yeah.
Right. Until you actually say yes to, to exploring more of those sides of you. And you never know what you'll find when you say yes too.
Yeah, and I actually that was a very fantastic way of taking through your journey, in terms of when you created all these Neetas which were already in you, right? So they were already there. They just were waiting to be acknowledged and being worked with, and bringing them out, which you then took those little golden nuggets and followed the breadcrumbs, and you're like, okay, now we are here, and this is what I am now, and this is where, and I love the process of what I like to call it, the process of evolution. So as a person, or you do evolve on a daily basis as well. You are already better off than where you were yesterday. And if you you have, like, let's say 12 months in a year, you've already evolved 12 times in 1 year. Let's say you're looking at that way, right? So every month you should have gained something which you did not know last month, right? And if you take that and you put them as your block pavements on top of each other, you are already much wiser, much better than where you were before. And that your story pretty much takes us through that journey of how you found your purposes, what you want to say yes to everything. Okay, let's try this. I want to be people like this who are always laughing, smiling, and talking, and I want to be there. And I love that you signed up to comedy and everything. Now, obviously we had a brief encounter in Estonia. We met briefly, so I'm not even sure if you remember me, but you have,
of course,
wonderful...
I do. Yes, it's so much fun.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Thank you. You have 2 wonderful children and a loving husband as well. How do you now manage that time? So this is something I would love to understand. Do you love scheduling, or is there a list to do things? And how do you manage all that, being available for everybody, I guess, right?
Yeah, I think there's seasons, and I think that having such a supportive partner, he is such a cheerleader for my dreams. And yes, for those listening, I did find love again, actually. And, I think when for those of you who are going through a transition or a season of life or loss, or a season where you're thinking, am I going to find love again? It's definitely there, and it's definitely accessible. For me, I just think I had to get super clear on what I wanted, and super clear on who I wanted to who I wanted to actually have and be in my life. And also, I think I had to get really honest with myself. Like, I had to really say, okay, I do want love. I do want partnership. I do want to co-create. I do want to, have an incredible, someone with me in the world to create and do amazing things with. What is stopping me? Because I felt like when I was kind of on the prowl and saying yes to dating, I still felt that I was a little bit closed off. And it's really, I even wrote a lot of that in my newest book, That Sucked. now what? Actually, Zishan, just for you, it's here. Ooh, you'll get it
Yes.
soon. And so, yeah, I mean, it's in the flesh. It's kind of cool. I was like, oh my gosh, this baby's coming out January 31st for everybody. So it's coming out in the new year, but you can actually pre-order now. And so I had to get clear on if I wanted somebody that was honest, I had to be honest. Like if I wanted somebody who was vulnerable, I had to be vulnerable. So take us through now, you know, 5 years into our relationship, and we're married, we have 2 kids, we have multiple businesses, and I think the same rings true. We have to be honest with what we want. So when I said, hey, this is going to be a really like big year for me because we just had our second daughter last year, and that communication, even when you're dating, even when you're trying to find that person, that doesn't shift. It just kind of changes where you then still become honest and you still become vulnerable. Hey, this means a lot for me. I'd really love your support. And, I think that especially one of the things that I had to really reconcile in this past years, especially now, because you just asked me, oh my gosh, you were in so many different places in the last week. How are you doing it?
Mm-hmm.
And, we actually had an agreement and we said, okay, this is what's happening. We have a book that's coming out, and he knows that. He's like, all right, I've got the kids, we have support, you go do what you need because this is like end of the year stuff. And that's the agreement that we had. And he knows that when it's his time or his season, he knows that I will totally have that same like support for him. And so it's been such a great, it feels really good. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think still as a mom, I still feel the guilt. And that's just something I've talked about on my podcast, on the Brave Table. And I don't know, it's like, I'd love to hear from, moms that have joined in, or, maybe like seasoned moms, if that goes away. I just don't know. I hear it like you have to make peace with it somehow, but I'm kind of in the thick of it of like, they're young, but then you want this book to like, reach the masses. And so I think we just kind of, it's like having that compassion for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But I do know I wouldn't want them to feel any sort of resentment because I didn't live out my dreams, and I'd want them to live out their dreams. So I think that's like what I'm making peace with.
That's actually a perfect answer to this, and you can see because I've been looking at your story. There's always a story every time I go into my Instagram, and I'm like, oh, where are you today? It's like you're all everywhere in the different places. I'm like, wow, you must be like following the schedule to the T there then, right? So you're everywhere. So. Also, I wanted to just check now, take us through in terms of your newest book. What was it called again? That Sucked Now What, right?
Yes.
That's it. That Sucked Now What. So what's
Mm-hmm.
the story behind the title? And I know I will just share a little bit that the first time I actually was hearing something from about it was the dinosaur on the stage and the dinosaur dance. Yeah, so just take us through how you want to interpret it.
Did you do it? Did you do the dinosaur dance on stage?
Well, I did, yes. I was one of the energizers as well in Estonia. So we were always on stage energizing everybody as well. So I was part of anything to do with dance. I was up there.
Okay, so for context, so we were, Zishan and I, we were in Estonia, and I basically was sharing how to build resiliency after you've had sucky moments, right? I've called them suck moments because we all have a suck moment. And for those who are like following or that just joined, I mean, put in the comments, like, what sucky moment have you gone through even this year? Like, was it, maybe it was a promotion you were supposed to get, or maybe it was you were supposed to, go somewhere with somebody, but it didn't happen. Somebody ghosted you. Someone promised you something. There was a betrayal. There was a back talk. Like something happened that didn't go to plan. Like what was it? I want to know, because I feel like I've been having suck moments like every day, especially, mama of two, my kid was up all night for 2 days right when I came home, super exhausted. And then it's like you're like, oh, mom duties, you know what, this is the surrender, and he just wanted mama, and like I was there for it. So it's like, all right, here we are. And then today we're in Chicago. So, but yeah, no, this book and the subtitle is How to Embrace the Joy and Chaos and Find Magic in the Mess. And I think for all of us, the last few years, we've just had, such a wake-up call because the world shut down. And I think that it really gave perspective on what we were shoving under a rug, right? In terms of our relationships, in terms of how we communicate, in terms of what we are handling or how we're handling things. Oh, hey there, Rick. And I think that's for so many people, they were like crying out for help. And I know that's one of the reasons why I started my podcast, The Brave Table, to have more of these brave conversations, because I know for myself, I felt like I was swimming in anxiety, swimming in like, just I've shared my guilt and how to make peace as a recovering perfectionist, how to make peace when things don't go your way, when you encounter failures, when you encounter sucky moments. And of course, as you all know, like I've had quite a bit of them that were like trauma related. And when I got into motherhood, it was like, okay, I can handle the really big stuff, but then it's the really small things day to day. Oh, hey, Deanna. And these small things day to day that were really just all about the human experience. So the spilled milk, my daughter not latching on, my son, not integrating as well. We just moved. I was pregnant. I had crazy postpartum. So it was just, and then it was just we just moved, different states, different homes, doing remodeling, started another business. I mean, the list goes on. And it's just like real life stuff. But I know that for so many people, they're battling different phases of mental health. And when I started to ask my audience, when I started to do these virtual keynotes, these virtual lectures, I wasn't alone in what I was experiencing. I know that there were so many relationships that broke up during the pandemic because they just didn't know how to have, difficult conversations. They didn't know how to prioritize relationships. So relationships kind of started to fall apart, and this is just this book that helps normalize talking about the sucky moments that will inevitably happen, whether it's a fallout with a friend, whether it's a promised raise that you didn't ever get, or maybe you got fired from your job. There are a lot of these types of suck moments that I think that for anyone who is getting into that different season of life, that's who this book is for. And what I love so much about it is it's broken up into 3 parts. So we explore the suck, right? All of the things, all of the shit in our lives that didn't work out for whatever reason. But then we get into 2 different concepts. And the first one is your bounce factor. And so your bounce factor is really a concept that came across when I actually moved to the Bay Area. I'd written my first book in the Bay Area. For those of you who don't know, it's basically where Silicon Valley thrives. It's like where all the big places are, Google, all of the places, Facebook or Meta, everyone's like in that part of the world, right? Silicon Valley. And I had just written Emotional Grit, and I had a mother reach out to me, and she said, and she got wind of my story and basically the book. And she said, can you please come and speak to this group of mothers? Because, we're really having difficulties with our kids, our teens. And I'm like, okay, wait, you want me? Like, former dentist? Wait, what? To come and speak to you guys? How could I possibly help? And they're like, well, you wrote this book, Emotional Grit, and you have such a big backstory around grit. And we're wondering is, can you actually build resiliency without going through the tough times that you went through? Because we have just they had lost, kids to suicide in that year. And so it was a really big topic. It was a really tough topic. But the question was, can you build resiliency even though you haven't been through? Do you have to go through tough times that you went through? And that really got me thinking huge, because it wasn't just about my story. It was about mental health of young people. And can we actually build resiliency without going through the shitter of life? And, and taking into account, I'm sure a lot of these moms have such incredible love for their kids. But in my research, then there are 4 components. And the first one is looking at your upbringing, right? Our upbringing of, well, what was expected in your household? Were there differences between, the guys and the girls growing up? I know in my house, as, a young girl, I wasn't allowed to talk back. I wasn't allowed to, get dirty, right? And, girl, and in some of my extended family, right, girls ate last when you went to like overseas or wherever. But that was just the story of my family. So everyone has these like different dynamics. Did you have helicopter parents? Did you have to grow up early? So these are all things that comprise your upbringing that actually increase or can actually have you, make peace with your bounce factor, or that actually have you, maybe look into some of the healing, right? And so we can't really change what's happened in our upbringing. We know a lot of folks don't even want to go there because maybe that part of their life was so hard. And so, but a lot of the ways that we make decisions is because of what we had experienced when we were younger, right? So if we were told, and I don't know about you, Zishan, but I was told when I was going through a lot of the losses in my life, well, don't cry. Tough girls don't cry. Big girls don't cry. Big boys don't cry. And so what did I think of doing my whole life?
Always boys not cry. Yeah, for us it's boys
right,
don't cry.
yeah,
So,
and that's the big thing, right? For children of immigrants, it's like they are not okay with expression of emotion. So even now, and this is probably the big impetus of the book, was when my son turned 2, he had really big emotions, like any 2-year-old, if you've ever spent time with a 2-year-old, right? And so making peace with your upbringing, but then also the second step is, how often are you actually exposing yourself to good stress? So that's the other thing, is we all think that we don't, and we're, averse to stress. But what about the times that we're actually exposing ourselves to good stress? So like speaking your voice, saying no to somebody, standing up for yourself, or introducing yourself at an event that you only know, like, maybe 1 or 2 people, but talking to the people that you don't know, right? So like having resiliency can also look like this. So increasing your bounce factor can also look like that. And then the last, 2 parts to that is your emotional capacity. So your emotional capacity to feel your feels. So if you are not good with expressing your anger, which most people pleasers and most recovering perfectionists are not, can you actually express yourself and feel? And that's exactly the practice that we were doing. So experiencing the rage, experiencing the hurt, experiencing it. And I had you guys screaming, shouting, stomping like a dinosaur, because it's easier, right? We're not going to judge ourselves. And that was the full emotional release process. But then at the last part of the bounce factor is your RSA. And your RSA is your radical self-awareness. And your radical self-awareness to actually know, well, how do I really feel about that? Like, how am I really, if I'm tuning in right now, do I really like what I'm doing? Do I really like who I'm actually hanging around with? Am I really going to say yes to that community, to that person? Because I don't like the way that I feel afterwards. And that's really trusting your gut. And so to build that skill of awareness, Ooh, okay. I have been scrolling for a really long time. My eyes are like coming out of my face right now. That's exactly what I tell my kid if we're like, okay, we've watched like one too many shows today, right? And so, but it's true to pay attention to these like tiny little subtleties so that we can
Mm.
realign with ourselves and to say yes to more of the things that light us up. So that's really your bounce factor, and that's one of the big takeaways from the book.
I love that, and it's obviously it's what I'm hearing there is as well is to tune into to oneself, to actually acknowledge uh, how you feel and how do you actually want to change as well. As
Yeah,
a lot of people don't go through that emotional check, and if they do the emotional check, they're not sure of what to do with them because they, you know, we
yeah,
are not taught to understand any of these things growing up. You know, you're just told get on with it, just do this, do that. Oh, this, don't worry about this. And when you're now you're an adult, you have to make decisions. Your brain defaults to your life experience, and what life did you have is what you had in the past. So it just looks at that and gives you a solution of, oh, this is what you should do, or this is what's near enough, and then you work with that, right?
yeah,
And I love that your book expands onto this and takes us through that journey. I recommend everybody to get it as soon as it comes out. It's available to pre-order. I've looked on Amazon, so you can do that on Amazon straight away. Um, we should be
yes.
wrapping this up shortly as well. Um, when so the last thing I would love to know before we wrap this up is, you know, what would you like to say to the listeners? And this episode will turn into a podcast in a couple of months' time. It will be available on every format which is out there. What would you like to leave
Yay.
them with as a close up of this conversation today?
Yeah, I would, really like to invite you all to, think of that version of yourself that is unapologetic to be brave during those moments that suck. And during those moments that perhaps maybe you feel like giving up, or you feel like nothing is going well for yourself, or you feel like, oh, man, I've worked so hard on this. I don't think things are turning around, or is this really meant for me? And when you find yourself in that moment, that you still draw in that courage because you have that bounce factor in yourself, even when it's the tiniest of hope there, that you just reach down and reach into that bravery so you can step and rise. And it's just those tiny little incremental steps, so that it's what I call those brave steps, so that you can be unapologetic and unwavering in what you want to call into your life. Because as Ishan, I think what we did start with was, sometimes we know what our purpose is, and sometimes we have to create that. But in order to create
Mm-hmm.
that, we need to reach into and dig into our own sense of bravery when we feel like, oh man, everything that I put out there, it's just not going right. Or, man, am I having a bad season? Or am I having, like, when is it going to happen for me, right? You're still able to create that reality in which you want, because you're unapologetic in digging into that brave side of you to make those small, incremental, brave steps.
I love that. Thank you very much, Neeta. And thank you very much for taking the time out to share this journey and leaving so many golden nuggets in this episode. Definitely is inspirational for people who've been tuning in live on Instagram today. Anybody who's been listening to us from the beginning or listening to this now as a podcast version, if you found, you know, a little spark moment in anywhere in this episode, or lost the golden nuggets that or aha moments, it's our duty now to share this episode with whomever that comes in your mind or you think should watch this, because we shouldn't keep that aha moments or inspiration within us, and create that spark with somebody else as well, because we don't know who's woken up or gone to bed thinking of a better
Thanks,
day.
love.
And if it's created that moment with you, it'll create that moment with them as well. And that's all we need to create out there for people to take that step. Neeta, thank you very much. And everybody else as well, thank you very much. We will see everybody next Tuesday. Thank you, Neeta.
So juicy. Thanks so much for
Bye.
having me, love. Bye.
Bye-bye.